The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Adelaide Cottage, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors where Prince William stood motionless. His hands trembled slightly as he held the phone, the words from the other end still echoing in his mind like a cruel reminder of life's fragility. Kate noticed the change in his posture immediately from across the room, the way his shoulders seemed to carry an invisible weight that hadn't been there moments before. She set down her cup of tea, the delicate china making barely a sound against the saucer, and moved toward him with the intuitive grace that had defined their relationship for over 2 decades. The children's laughter drifted in from the garden where George, Charlotte, and Louis were playing with their golden retriever Orla, their innocent joy creating a stark contrast to the heavy atmosphere that had suddenly filled the room. William's face had gone pale, his usually steady hands now shaking as he placed the phone on the mahogany side table. Kate reached him just as his knees began to buckle, her arms wrapping around him instinctively, providing the anchor he desperately needed. In that moment of devastating revelation, the news had been unexpected, brutal in its timing and merciless in its implications for their family's future. The call had come from William's private secretary, a man who had delivered both triumphant news and tragic updates throughout the years of royal service. This time, however, the tremor in his voice had betrayed the gravity of what he was about to share. The medical reports had arrived earlier that morning, and the specialists at London's most prestigious hospital had reached a unanimous conclusion that would forever alter the trajectory of their lives. Kate felt William's body tremble against hers, his breathing becoming shallow and irregular as the full weight of the diagnosis settled upon them both. She guided him to the nearby armchair, the same one where they had shared countless quiet moments during their years at Adelaide Cottage, discussing everything from state affairs to the children's school projects. Now it would become the place where they first confronted the reality of Kate's aggressive cancer diagnosis together. The irony wasn't lost on either of them that this news had arrived on what should have been an ordinary Tuesday morning. Kate had been feeling unwell for weeks, attributing her fatigue and persistent symptoms to the demanding schedule of royal engagements and the constant juggling act of motherhood. The initial medical consultations had been precautionary, she had assured William, nothing more than routine checkups that would likely result in a prescription for vitamins and a recommendation for more rest. But the tests had revealed something far more sinister lurking within her body, something that threatened not just her health but the very foundation of their family's stability. The oncologist's words had been clinical yet compassionate, explaining the aggressive nature of the cancer cells and the immediate need for intensive treatment protocols that would challenge every aspect of their carefully structured lives. Williams' mind raced through the implications, the ripple effects that would extend far beyond their private family circle. The public duties, the royal engagements, the children's schooling, the media scrutiny that would intensify once news of Kate's condition became public knowledge. But in that moment, surrounded by the familiar comfort of their home, none of those concerns mattered more than the woman in his arms who had just received a diagnosis that could potentially cut their time together devastatingly short. Kate, despite being the one facing the medical battle ahead, found herself comforting William, her hands stroking his hair as he struggled to process the magnitude of what lay before them. She had always been the stronger of the two when it came to emotional crises, the steady presence who could navigate through turbulent waters with grace and determination. This situation would test that strength like nothing before, but she instinctively knew that William would need her guidance to find his footing in this new reality. The sounds from the garden continued, their children blissfully unaware that their world was about to change in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. George's voice carried through the open window as he called out instructions for their impromptu football match, Charlotte's delighted squeals mixing with Louis's infectious giggling as they chased each other across the perfectly manicured lawn that had become their sanctuary from public life. How would they tell the children? The question hung unspoken between William and Kate, both understanding that this conversation would be one of the most difficult they would ever have to navigate as parents. The balance between honesty and age-appropriate information, between preparing them for the challenges ahead while maintaining some semblance of normalcy in their young lives, seemed almost impossible to achieve. Kate's thoughts drifted to her own parents, Carol and Michael Middleton, who had been her unwavering support system throughout every challenge she had faced since joining the royal family. They would need to know soon before the medical appointments began in earnest and the treatment schedule started dictating the rhythm of their days. The thought of seeing her mother's face when she shared this news brought fresh tears to Kate's eyes, understanding that her parents would be reliving their own fears and anxieties about losing a child. The clock on the mantelpiece chimed 11, its melodic notes seeming unusually loud in the hushed atmosphere of the room. William lifted his head from Kate's shoulder, his eyes red-rimmed but determined, the initial shock beginning to transform into the resolute strength that had carried him through previous family crises. They would face this together, he whispered, against her ear, just as they had faced every other challenge that had tested their bond over the years. Kate nodded, feeling the first stirrings of the fighting spirit that would need to sustain her through the months ahead. The diagnosis was devastating, but it wasn't a death sentence, she reminded herself, drawing upon the same inner resilience that had helped her adapt to royal life and overcome the intense public scrutiny that had followed their relationship. From its earliest days. They had overcome obstacles before, and they would find a way to overcome this one too, no matter how steep the mountain ahead appeared to be. The following days passed in a blur of medical appointments, hushed phone conversations, and careful orchestration of their public appearances to maintain the illusion that everything remained normal. Kate found herself moving through the motions of royal duties with practiced precision, while her mind grappled with the reality of what Dr. Sarah Chen had explained during their private consultation at the London clinic. The aggressive nature of her diagnosis meant that treatment would need to begin immediately before the cancer had a chance to spread beyond its current boundaries. William had insisted on accompanying her to every appointment, his protective instincts heightened by the vulnerability he saw in Kate's eyes, despite her outward composure. He watched as she asked detailed questions about treatment options, survival rates, and the impact on their children's lives, her journalist's training. From their university days serving her well as she sought to understand every aspect of the battle ahead. The medical team had been impressed by her thorough preparation and her determination to be an active participant in her treatment decisions. The hardest part had been maintaining their regular routine while processing such life-altering information. Kate continued to attend the children's school events, her smile never wavering as she chatted with other parents about homework assignments and upcoming sports competitions. But William could see the exhaustion in her posture when she thought no one was looking, the way she gripped the armrest of her chair a little tighter during long meetings. The subtle changes that only someone who had loved her for 20 years would notice. Their bedroom had become a sanctuary where they could finally let their guards down, speaking in whispers about treatment schedules and the logistics of managing their royal responsibilities while Kate underwent chemotherapy. The irony that they had more privacy concerns about her medical treatment than most couples wasn't lost on either of them. Every doctor's visit required coordination with security teams, every treatment session would need to be scheduled around public engagements, and every side effect would have to be carefully managed to avoid speculation from the ever-watchful media. Kate had made the decision to cut her hair before the chemotherapy began, wanting to maintain some control over the physical changes that lay ahead. William sat behind her on their bedroom floor, carefully gathering the long chestnut locks. That had become one of her signature features, his hands gentle as he helped her through this symbolic act of preparation for the battle ahead. The hair would go to a charity that made wigs for children with cancer, she had decided, finding purpose in what might otherwise feel like a devastating loss. The children had begun to notice subtle changes in their parents' behavior, though George, Charlotte and Louis remained unaware of the specific reasons behind the increased number of quiet conversations that stopped when they entered a room. Charlotte, with her characteristic perceptiveness, had asked Kate why she looked tired more often, prompting careful responses about the importance of rest and self-care that didn't reveal the whole truth, but weren't entirely dishonest either. William found himself studying his children's faces with new intensity during their evening routines, memorizing the way Louis giggled when his father made silly voices during bedtime stories, how Charlotte concentrated so seriously when working on her art projects, and the earnest way George discussed his football strategies and school friendships. The possibility that Kate might not be there to witness all of their future milestones had become a constant undercurrent in his thoughts, making every ordinary moment feel precious and fleeting. The support system they would need began taking shape through carefully orchestrated conversations with trusted family members and staff. Carol Middleton had moved temporarily into the guest wing of their home, her presence providing both practical help with the children and emotional support for Kate as she prepared for treatment. The Queen Consort had called personally to offer whatever assistance the royal family could provide, her own experience with health challenges lending authenticity to her words of encouragement and understanding. Kate's medical team had outlined a treatment protocol that would span several months, including surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation therapy, each phase presenting its own challenges and potential complications. The oncologist had been cautiously optimistic about her prognosis, explaining that catching the cancer at this stage provided them with several effective treatment options, but the road ahead would be physically and emotionally demanding for the entire family. The logistics of managing Kate's treatment while maintaining their public duties required careful planning with their private secretaries and the palace communications team. They would need to find ways to fulfill their royal obligations while protecting Kate's health and energy, possibly requiring William to take on additional responsibilities while Kate focused on her recovery. The delicate balance between transparency with the public and maintaining their family's privacy would be one of the most challenging aspects of the journey ahead. Sleep had become elusive for both of them, Kate often lying awake thinking about the treatments ahead while William stared at the ceiling, his mind cycling through worst-case scenarios and contingency plans. Their conversations in those dark hours before dawn had become more honest and vulnerable than they had been in years, stripped of the usual layers of royal protocol and public expectations that typically influence their interactions. Kate had started keeping a private journal, documenting her thoughts and feelings about the diagnosis and treatment process, partly for her own emotional processing and partly as a potential legacy for her children should the outcome not be as positive. As they all hoped, writing had always been therapeutic for her, a way to organize her thoughts and find clarity amid chaos, and this situation certainly qualified as the most chaotic period of her adult life. The weight of keeping such a significant secret from the public was beginning to show in both of their faces, despite their best efforts to maintain their usual composure during official engagements. Close observers might have noticed that Kate's smiles seemed slightly more forced than usual, that William's protective positioning near his wife had become more pronounced, and that their public displays of affection carried an urgency that hadn't been present before. But for now, their secret remained safe, allowing them time to process and plan before facing the inevitable public scrutiny that would accompany any announcement about Kate's health. The morning of Kate's first chemotherapy session arrived with unseasonable warmth for October, the autumn leaves outside the London clinic creating a tapestry of gold and amber that seemed almost mockingly beautiful given the circumstances. William had cleared his entire schedule, ignoring the protests from his private secretary about the important meetings that would need to be rescheduled. Nothing, he had stated firmly, was more important than being by Kate's side as she began this fight for her life. Kate had woken early, her usual morning routine taking on new significance as she prepared for a day that would mark the beginning of a grueling treatment protocol. She had chosen her clothes carefully, selecting a comfortable cashmere sweater in her favorite shade of blue and soft trousers that would allow her to rest comfortably during the lengthy infusion process. The simple act of getting dressed had become an assertion of normalcy in a situation where nothing felt normal anymore. The children had been told they were going to spend a special day with their grandmother while their parents attended an important meeting, a version of the truth that protected their innocence while allowing William and Kate to focus entirely on the medical procedures ahead. Charlotte had hugged her mother extra tightly that morning, her intuitive nature picking up on the underlying tension that permeated the household, despite everyone's efforts to maintain a cheerful facade. Dr. Chen greeted them personally when they arrived at the clinic, her warm smile and confident demeanor providing reassurance during what felt like one of the most frightening moments of their lives. The oncology wing had been specially arranged to ensure maximum privacy, with additional security measures in place and a carefully selected team of medical professionals who had all signed comprehensive confidentiality agreements. Even in her moment of greatest vulnerability, Kate's status as a future queen required extraordinary precautions. The treatment room had been made as comfortable as possible, with soft lighting, classical music playing quietly in the background, and fresh flowers that William had specifically requested to brighten the sterile medical environment. Kate settled into the reclining chair that would be her home for the next several hours, her hand immediately seeking William's as the nursing staff began the process of preparing her IV line and reviewing the treatment protocol one final time. William watched as the clear liquid began flowing through the IV tube into his wife's arm, each drop representing both hope for her recovery and the harsh reality of the toxins that would be coursing through her body in an attempt to destroy the cancer cells. He had researched extensively about chemotherapy side effects, preparing himself for the nausea, fatigue, and hair loss that would likely accompany Kate's treatment. But nothing could truly prepare him for witnessing the woman he loved undergo such an intense medical intervention. Kate had brought along several books, her iPad loaded with podcasts, and a small needlepoint project that she hoped would help pass the time during the lengthy infusion sessions. But as the medication began taking effect, she found concentration difficult and instead focused on the gentle pressure of William's hand in hers and the quiet conversation they maintained about everything except the treatment she was receiving. They discussed plans for George's upcoming school project, Charlotte's interest in ballet lessons, and Louis's latest fascination with building elaborate structures with his construction toys. The nursing staff, led by Sister Margaret, a veteran oncology nurse with over 20 years of experience, monitored Kate's vital signs closely while maintaining the respectful distance that royal protocol required. Sister Margaret had treated many high-profile patients over the years, but she was struck by the genuine love and partnership she witnessed between William and Kate, the way they supported each other through this ordeal with a grace that spoke to the strength of their relationship. Midway through the treatment, Kate experienced her first wave of nausea, a side effect that Dr. Chen had warned them about, but which still came as a shock when it hit. William immediately called for Sister Margaret, his voice tight with concern as he watched Kate's face go pale and her breathing become shallow. The anti-nausea medication provided relief within minutes, but the incident served as a stark reminder of the physical toll the treatment would take on Kate's body over the coming months. As the hours passed, William found himself studying every detail of Kate's face, memorizing the way the afternoon light fell across her features and the peaceful expression she wore when she dozed between conversations. The possibility that this could be one of many such sessions, or conversely, that their time together might be more limited than they had ever imagined, gave every moment a poignancy that was almost overwhelming. He had never felt more helpless, or more determined to be the strength she would need in the challenging months ahead. Kate's thoughts drifted often to their children during the long treatment session, wondering how they would cope with seeing her during the more difficult phases of her recovery. She and William had already decided to be honest with George, Charlotte, and Louis about her illness. but finding the right words to explain cancer and chemotherapy to children aged 10, 8, and 5, respectively, seemed like an impossible challenge. They wanted to prepare them for the changes ahead, without frightening them or burdening them with adult concerns they weren't equipped to handle. The final hour of treatment brought a mix of relief and anxiety as Kate realized she had successfully completed her first chemotherapy session but still had many more ahead of her. The fatigue that Dr. Chen had described began setting in, making her feel as though her limbs were weighted down and her thoughts were moving through thick fog. William helped her gather her belongings and supported her as they made their way to the private car that would take them home to Adelaide Cottage and the children who were anxiously waiting for their return. The drive home was quiet, Kate resting, her head against William's shoulder while he held her close and watched the familiar countryside pass by their windows. She had insisted on returning home the same day, rather than staying overnight at the clinic, wanting to maintain as much normalcy as possible for their family's sake. The children would be expecting them for dinner, and Kate was determined to be present for their bedtime routines despite the exhaustion that was already beginning to overwhelm her system. As they approached their home, William felt a surge of determination mixed with fear about the journey they had just begun. The first treatment was behind them, but it represented only the beginning of a long and uncertain road ahead. Kate's courage throughout the day had inspired him, but he also understood that the real challenges would come in the days and weeks that followed as the cumulative effects of treatment began taking their toll on her body and their family's ability to maintain their carefully constructed sense of normalcy. 3 weeks into Kate's treatment regimen, the side effects that Dr. Chen had warned them about began manifesting with a vengeance that caught them both off guard, despite their careful preparation. Kate woke one morning to find clumps of her remaining hair on her pillow, the reality of chemotherapy-induced hair loss hitting her with unexpected emotional force, even though she had intellectually prepared for this moment. William found her sitting on the edge of their bed, staring at the chestnut strands in her hands, with tears streaming down her face. The children had finally been told about their mother's illness during a carefully planned family meeting in their sitting room, with Carol Middleton present for additional support and comfort. George had asked immediate questions about whether his mother would die, his 10-year-old mind struggling to process the concept of cancer and its potential consequences. Charlotte had quietly moved closer to Kate on the sofa, her small hand finding her mother's and holding tight throughout the entire conversation. Louis, at 5 years old, had seemed more confused than frightened, asking if the medicine would make Mummy feel better soon. William had handled the explanation with remarkable composure, using age-appropriate language to describe cancer as illness, where some cells in Mummy's body weren't working properly and needed special medicine to help them get better. He emphasized that many people got better from cancer, that they had excellent doctors helping them, and that their family would work together to support each other through this challenging time. The questions that followed had been heart-wrenching in their innocence and devastating in their implications. The logistics of managing Kate's treatment while maintaining royal duties had become increasingly complex as her energy levels fluctuated unpredictably from day to day. Some mornings, she felt well enough to attend important engagements, her makeup carefully applied to disguise the pallor that had crept into her complexion, and her elegant scarves strategically chosen to camouflage her thinning hair. Other days, she could barely manage to get out of bed, the nausea and fatigue combining to create a fog of misery that made even simple tasks feel overwhelming. William had quietly rearranged his schedule to be present for more of the children's daily routines, taking over school pickups and bedtime stories when Kate was too exhausted to participate. He watched their children adapt to their mother's changing condition with a resilience that both amazed and broke his heart, the way they learned to speak more quietly when she was resting and to offer extra hugs when she looked particularly tired. Charlotte had started leaving small drawings and notes by Kate's bedside, colorful expressions of love that brought tears to her mother's eyes every morning. The Palace communications team had become increasingly concerned about maintaining the secrecy of Kate's diagnosis, as public speculation about her reduced appearance schedule began generating unwanted media attention. Several tabloid publications had begun printing stories questioning her health, forcing carefully worded statements about minor medical procedures and temporary schedule adjustments that skirted the edge of dishonesty while protecting their family's privacy. The pressure of maintaining these deceptions, while dealing with the reality of Kate's illness, added another layer of stress to an already overwhelming situation. Kate's relationship with food had become complicated by the persistent nausea that accompanied each treatment cycle, making it difficult to maintain proper nutrition at a time when her body desperately needed strength to fight the cancer and recover from the harsh medications. William had learned to prepare simple, bland foods that might appeal to her changing palate, often sitting patiently beside her while she managed only a few spoonfuls of soup or nibbles of plain toast. The weight loss was becoming noticeable, requiring careful wardrobe choices for public appearances to avoid speculation about her health. The emotional toll of watching Kate suffer through treatment was beginning to show in William's behavior, despite his efforts to maintain strength. For his family, he found himself snapping at staff members over minor issues, his patience worn thin by the constant worry about his wife's condition and the impossible balancing act of protecting their children while managing public responsibilities. His mother-in-law had gently suggested that he might benefit from speaking with a counselor, recognizing the signs of stress and depression that were becoming increasingly apparent in his daily interactions. Sleep had become fragmented for both of them, Kate often waking in the middle of the night feeling sick or uncomfortable, while William lay awake listening to her breathing and fighting his own anxiety about what the future might hold. Their bedroom had been equipped with additional pillows to help Kate find comfortable sleeping positions, anti-nausea medications within easy reach, and a bell system that allowed her to call for help without having to speak when she felt too unwell to move. The intimacy of their relationship had necessarily shifted to accommodate Kate's physical limitations and the emotional vulnerability that accompanied her treatment. During Kate's stronger days, they made deliberate efforts to create special memories with their children, understanding that these moments of relative normalcy might become precious in retrospect, regardless of the ultimate outcome of her treatment. They organized movie nights in the family room, with everyone cuddled together on the large sofa while Louis chose animated films that made them all laugh. Kate treasured these evenings when she felt well enough to be fully present with her family, storing up the sound of their children's laughter and the warmth of their small bodies pressed against hers. The medical appointments had become a rhythm in their weekly schedule, each visit bringing new assessments of Kate's progress and adjustments to her treatment protocol based on how well she was tolerating the medications. Dr. Chen remained cautiously optimistic about Kate's response to treatment, explaining that while the side effects were challenging, the scans showed that the tumors were shrinking as hoped. These updates provided crucial hope during the darkest moments when Kate wondered if she had the strength to continue fighting. William had started keeping his own private journal, documenting not just the medical details of Kate's treatment, but also the small victories and setbacks that marked their daily life during this period. He wrote about Charlotte's pride when she successfully braided her mother's remaining hair, about George's mature decision to skip a friend's birthday party because he wanted to stay home with Kate, and about Louis's innocent questions that sometimes provided unexpected moments of lightness amid the gravity of their situation. These records became his way of processing emotions too complex and frightening to share with anyone else, including Kate herself. The support network that had formed around their family included not just their immediate relatives, but also a carefully selected group of friends and staff members who had proven themselves trustworthy and dedicated to protecting their privacy. This inner circle understood the delicate balance required to provide practical assistance while respecting the family's need for space and normalcy during treatment periods. Each person had been assigned specific responsibilities, from managing the children's activities to coordinating with medical staff, creating a web of support that allowed William and Kate to focus on what mattered most during this critical time. The turning point came on a gray December morning when Kate sat in Dr. Chen's office, William's hand gripping hers tightly as they waited for the results of her latest scans. The previous months had been a blur of treatments, side effects, and carefully managed public appearances. But this appointment would determine whether the grueling chemotherapy regimen had been successful in shrinking the tumors that had threatened to steal their future together. The silence in the consultation room felt heavy with possibility and dread in equal measure. Dr. Chen entered with a smile that immediately set both of their hearts racing with hope, her positive expression speaking volumes before she even began, explaining the scan results. The tumors had responded better than expected to the treatment protocol, shrinking by nearly 70% and showing no signs of spreading to other areas of Kate's body. The news represented not just medical progress, but the first real breath of relief that William and Kate had been able to take since that devastating phone call months earlier. Kate's immediate reaction was to think of their children who had adapted to their mother's illness with a maturity that both impressed and saddened their parents. George had taken on additional responsibilities around the house without being asked, helping his younger siblings with homework and bedtime routines when Kate was too exhausted from treatment. Charlotte had become fiercely protective of her mother, carefully monitoring Kate's energy levels and suggesting rest periods before Kate even realized she needed them. Louis, despite his young age, had learned to play more quietly when his mother was having difficult days, his natural exuberance tempered by an intuitive understanding that Mummy needed extra care. The decision about when and how to share Kate's diagnosis with the public had been weighing heavily on both William and Kate as her treatment progressed. The media speculation about her reduced public schedule had intensified, with increasingly invasive attempts by photographers and reporters to capture images that might reveal the truth about her condition. The Palace communications team had been working overtime to manage the narrative while respecting the family's desire for privacy during such a vulnerable time. But everyone understood that a public announcement would eventually become necessary. William had found unexpected strength in the role of primary caregiver and protector that circumstances had thrust upon him. The man who had once struggled with the public aspects of royal duty discovered that private service to his family came naturally and brought him a sense of purpose that transcended any official responsibilities. He had learned to recognize the subtle signs that indicated Kate was having a difficult day, adjusting his own schedule and energy accordingly to provide whatever support she needed without making her feel like an invalid. The holiday season had taken on special significance as their family navigated Kate's treatment schedule around traditional celebrations that the children had always treasured. Christmas at Sandringham was modified to accommodate Kate's limited energy levels, with shorter gathering periods and quiet spaces available when she needed to rest. The extended royal family had rallied around William and Kate with a level of personal support that went far beyond formal protocol, understanding that this crisis transcended any previous family disagreements or tensions. Kate's physical appearance had been dramatically altered by the months of chemotherapy, her once lustrous hair now completely gone and her face showing the gaunt effects of treatment-related weight loss. But William found that these changes had only deepened his appreciation for her courage and determination, watching her face each treatment session and public appearance with a grace that humbled him daily. She had acquired a collection of elegant scarves and stylish wigs that allowed her to maintain her polished public image while accommodating her changed appearance. The children's schools had been discreetly informed about Kate's condition to ensure that George, Charlotte, and Louis received appropriate support if they experienced emotional difficulties during this period. Their teachers reported that all three children were handling the situation with remarkable resilience, though Charlotte had shown some signs of anxiety during her mother's worst treatment days. The school counselors had been working quietly with each child to provide coping strategies and emotional outlets for their fears and concerns about their mother's health. As Kate's treatment progressed through the winter months, she and William had numerous conversations about their priorities and values, discussions that brought a new depth to their relationship despite the circumstances that prompted them. Kate spoke often about her desire to see their children reach certain milestones, to be present for Louis starting proper school, Charlotte's continued development in her various interests, and George's transition toward greater independence. These conversations were both heartbreaking and hopeful, acknowledging the uncertainty of the future while affirming their commitment to making the most of whatever time they had together. The support they received from unexpected quarters had been one of the few positive aspects of this difficult period. Letters and messages from people around the world who had learned hints about Kate's health struggles provided comfort and encouragement during the darkest moments. Former patients who had successfully battled similar diagnoses reached out through intermediaries to share their experiences and offer hope, creating a sense of community that transcended social boundaries and royal protocols. William's relationship with his own father had evolved during this period, with King Charles providing both practical support and emotional guidance drawn from his own experiences with health challenges and family crises. The king had quietly adjusted royal schedules to accommodate William's need to focus on his family, taking on additional duties without fanfare or public recognition. These private acts of support had strengthened the bond between father and son in ways that years of formal training and protocol had never achieved. Kate had begun making tentative plans for gradually returning to a more active public schedule, understanding that her role as a future queen required her presence at certain key events regardless of her personal health situation. Dr. Chen had encouraged these plans as part of Kate's psychological recovery, explaining that having goals and responsibilities beyond treatment would contribute positively to her overall healing process. The balance between protecting her health and fulfilling her public duties would require careful management, but the positive response to treatment made such planning possible for the first time in months. The experience of facing a potentially terminal illness had fundamentally changed both William and Kate's perspectives on their royal roles and personal priorities. They had gained a deeper appreciation for the ordinary moments of family life that had previously been taken for granted, finding joy in simple activities like helping with homework or reading bedtime stories that had once felt routine. This shift in perspective would influence their approach to public service and parenting in ways they were only beginning to understand, marking the beginning of a new chapter in their lives together that honored both the fragility and resilience they had discovered within themselves and their family. 6 months after that first devastating phone call, Kate stood before her bedroom mirror, applying makeup for her first major public engagement since her diagnosis, her hands steady despite the significance of the moment. The woman reflected back, and her looked different from the one who had received that life-changing news, not just physically, but in ways that spoke to a deeper transformation brought about by confronting mortality and emerging victorious. Her hair had begun growing back in soft waves, shorter than before but healthy and strong, symbolizing the renewal that extended far beyond her physical recovery. William watched from their bed as Kate prepared for what they both understood would mark her official return to public life, though the palace would never explicitly acknowledge the gap that her illness had created in her schedule. The past months had tested every aspect of their relationship and family dynamics, but they had emerged with a bond deepened by shared struggle and a clearer understanding of what truly mattered in their lives together. The fear that had initially overwhelmed them both had gradually given way to gratitude for each day they had together and determination to make the most of their restored future. The children had adapted to their mother's recovery with the same resilience they had shown during her illness, though the experience had undoubtedly changed them in subtle but lasting ways. George approached his responsibilities with a seriousness that hadn't been present before his mother's diagnosis, while Charlotte had developed an almost protective instinct toward Kate, that manifested in frequent checks on her well-being and spontaneous expressions of affection. Louis, despite his young age, seemed to have an intuitive understanding that their family had weathered something significant, his natural exuberance now balanced with moments of unexpected tenderness toward his mother. Dr. Chen had officially declared Kate in remission during their most recent appointment, explaining that while ongoing monitoring would be necessary, the scans showed no evidence of remaining cancer cells, and her blood work indicated that her body was recovering well from the intensive treatment she had endured. The word remission had felt almost too precious to speak aloud, representing not just medical success, but the restoration of hope for a future that had seemed uncertain for so many months. The decision to gradually share Kate's story with the public had been carefully orchestrated over several weeks, with trusted journalists receiving exclusive access to parts of their journey in exchange for respectful coverage that focused on hope and recovery rather than sensationalizing their family's private struggle. The initial media response had been overwhelmingly supportive, with messages of encouragement pouring in from around the world and other cancer survivors sharing their own stories of successfully overcoming similar diagnoses. Kate's first speech, upon returning to public duties, had focused on the importance of early detection and the incredible advances in cancer treatment that had made her recovery possible. She spoke with an authenticity and emotional depth that hadn't characterized her previous public addresses, her personal experience lending power to words that might otherwise have seemed like standard royal platitudes. The audience had responded with standing ovations that reflected not just respect for her courage, but genuine admiration for her vulnerability in sharing such a personal journey with the public. William had watched from the side of the stage as Kate delivered her remarks, his pride in her strength and resilience mixing with memories of the frightened woman who had clung to him that first morning when they received her diagnosis. The transformation hadn't been easy or quick, but it had been complete, turning a devastating health crisis into an opportunity for personal growth and deeper connection with the people they served. Her willingness to be open about her experience had already begun inspiring others facing similar battles, with cancer charities reporting increased donations and more people seeking early screening appointments. The private moments of their recovery had been just as significant as the public ones, filled with conversations about priorities and perspectives that had fundamentally altered how they approached both their royal duties and their family life. Kate had developed a deeper appreciation for the simple pleasures of daily life, finding joy in morning cups of tea, quiet conversations with the children, and evening walks through their garden that she had previously taken for granted. These small rituals had become sacred during her treatment when each day feeling well enough to participate felt like a gift. Their children had learned lessons about resilience, family loyalty, and the importance of supporting loved ones through difficult times that would serve them well throughout their lives. George had discovered leadership qualities in himself as he helped care for his siblings during Kate's most challenging treatment days, while Charlotte had developed an empathy and emotional intelligence that exceeded her years. Louis, though young, had absorbed the family's values of persistence and hope in ways that would shape his character as he grew older. The experience had also strengthened Kate and William's commitment to using their platform to support cancer, research, and patient advocacy, with plans already underway for a new charitable foundation focused on improving treatment options and support systems for families facing similar diagnoses. Kate's personal experience would inform their approach to this work, ensuring that their efforts addressed not just medical needs, but the emotional and practical challenges that accompany a cancer diagnosis for entire families. The letters and messages they had received from around the world during Kate's treatment had revealed the profound impact that sharing their struggle had on others facing similar challenges. Parents wrote about feeling less alone in their fear for their children's well-being. Spouses described finding strength in seeing William's devotion to Kate during her illness, and cancer patients themselves expressed gratitude for seeing someone in the public eye, acknowledged the reality of treatment while maintaining hope for recovery. As Kate finished her preparations for the public engagement, she reflected on how the woman in the mirror had been forged through months of uncertainty, pain, and ultimate triumph over circumstances that had initially seemed insurmountable. The physical scars from her treatment were mostly hidden, but the emotional and spiritual growth that had accompanied her recovery had become integral parts of who she was now. She understood that she would never again take her health, her family, or her future for granted, and that this awareness would inform every decision and interaction in the years to come. William joined her at the mirror, his reflection appearing beside hers as he adjusted his tie and prepared to accompany her into this new phase of their public life together. They had weathered the storm that had threatened to destroy their carefully constructed world, emerging not just intact, but stronger and more unified than before. The tears behind the door had dried, replaced by a quiet confidence in their ability to face whatever challenges the future might bring, secure in the knowledge that their love for each other and their family could overcome even the most daunting obstacles. The car that would take them to the engagement waited outside, its presence symbolizing their return to the public duties that had been temporarily set aside while they fought for Kate's life. But everything felt different now, infused with meaning and purpose that transcended protocol and tradition. They were no longer simply fulfilling royal obligations, but using their platform to serve others who might find hope and inspiration in their story of survival, recovery, and renewed commitment to the life they had almost lost. As they stepped out into the morning sunlight together, hand in hand, they carried with them the hard-won wisdom that comes only from facing mortality and discovering that love, hope, and determination can indeed conquer even the darkest of circumstances.